July 23, 1983. Captain Bob Pearson is flying a Boeing 767 at 41,000 feet. Suddenly, both engines went dead. First, the fuel pumps quit. Then the left engine stopped. Shortly after, the right engine stopped providing thrust entirely. With no engines to generate power, the cockpit instruments went dark, leaving Pearson with basic, battery-powered emergency gauges. In an emergency like this, pilots are trained to rely on their flight checklists. Pearson immediately reached for the manual, looking for the specific set of procedures to handle a massive twin-engine failure. He flipped through the pages, but he found nothing. The engineers who designed the plane never included a checklist for gliding a 767 with zero fuel and no hydraulic controls. The situation had shifted from a highly controlled flight path into a complete unknown. When environments instantly transition from predictable to completely unfamiliar, standard operating procedures cease to exist.
We usually trust that complex, high-stakes tasks are best managed by breaking them down into a sequence of explicit if-then steps. This trust is often well-placed. Dr. Peter Pronovost introduced a simple 5-step checklist for inserting catheter lines in intensive care units. This chart shows the impact of that checklist across Michigan hospitals. The rate of line infections dropped by 66%, saving an estimated $175 million. In well-ordered systems, a checklist creates a stable baseline to eliminate human error. But much of our world does not operate under the bright, clear light of predictable rules. We frequently have to make decisions in the shadows, in volatile situations where the variables keep changing. In these shifting environments, rigidly following a procedure can actually cause failure. Cognitive researchers call this malicious compliance, when workers follow a manual exactly as written, even as the situation around them actively unravels. This flowchart visualizes how AccuWeather discovered that their strict procedural guidelines were acting as an equalizer. Mediocre forecasters followed the linear, step-by-step flowchart, the low road, and put out adequate predictions. But top experts hit a performance plateau because rules restricted their ability to sense unusual weather patterns. To step off that low road, experts rely on a completely different cognitive tool, tacit knowledge. It is the unspoken expertise required to navigate outside the manual. You cannot learn it from a textbook. Mastering an ambiguous environment requires abandoning explicit rules to rely heavily on accumulated human experience. This diagram illustrates how explicit rules and procedures are the visible tip of the iceberg. What supports them below the surface is a massive submerged structure of tacit knowledge. It is built on perceptual discriminations. A seasoned store detective, for example, watches how people move down an aisle, instantly separating the visual pattern of a confused shopper from the highly precise, disconnected movements of a shoplifter. It also relies on mental models. When the U.S. Army deployed a new landmine detector, standard sweeping procedures failed to locate low-metal mines, but a veteran clearer named Rocky Rockwell found them with a 90% success rate, entirely by ignoring the manual's recommended sweep speeds. Rockwell built a 3-dimensional story of the soil in his mind. He used his years in the field to visualize exactly how threats were planted, looking past the simple audio pings of his detector. Finally, tacit knowledge is the ability to adapt procedures on the fly. Police SWAT teams have strict rules to enter a building in formation and systematically clear every single room from the ground floor up. If they sweep the entire first floor, it gives an armed suspect 2 full minutes to wake up and prepare for a fight. So instead, they bypass the manual and head straight to the master bedroom. Mastery is the hard-earned intuition to know exactly when a rule must be broken. Think of the difference between mindless compliance and adaptive navigation as the difference between written directions and a map. This route visualization shows, but if that street is suddenly closed, your instructions are completely useless. A map shows you the surrounding terrain, empowering you to reroute around the obstacle. When an organization tries to over-standardize complex work by forcing its people to follow endless directions, it slowly strips workers of their ability to read the map. They lose the capacity to improvise. We cannot simply standardize our way out of volatile problems. Which brings us back to Captain Pearson in the cockpit of his powerless 767, dropping out of the sky at more than 20 feet per second. Coming in far too high and too fast, Pearson abandoned commercial airline protocols. Instead, he reached into his tacit knowledge from his weekends flying recreational gliders. he applied a maneuver called a slide slip. By crossing his controls, pushing the yoke left while pressing hard on the right rudder, he began skidding the jet sideways through the air, generating enough drag to force a rapid drop in altitude and speed. It was a radical maneuver that no one had ever attempted in a commercial airliner, but it worked. Pearson leveled the plane just 40 feet off the ground and touched down safely on a former Air Force runway in Gimli, saving the lives of all 61 people on board. We should always rely on a checklist when the environment is perfectly predictable. But when the lights go out and the environment turns chaotic, it is human intuition that will keep us alive.